Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Build business with Chamber 630, one of the largest business organizations in DuPage County. Marketing your business and connecting clients is their priority. Visit chamber630.com or call 630-968-4050 to join today.
Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Dan and Amy, news just came across the transom. Cook County Circuit Court Clerk Dorothy Brown is retiring.
She's
to
not
be generous
to not seek re-election.
Yeah, she's not.
So that means you can't wear jeans on Fridays anymore.
In the circuit
Remember?
court. Well, maybe Spyropoulos, that MWRD commissioner, or whoever else replaces, or maybe they'll keep the Friday jeans policy.
Day.
I mean, as long as you contribute to the campaign.
Right, you got to
fund.
pay at least $3, which I think they should bump it up to $5.
Yeah,
now.
maybe she'll keep that tradition, Spyropoulos or whoever replaces Brown. And maybe, Dorothy Brown, maybe now that she goes back into the private sector, she could be in line for like a casino operator's license or something.
Oh, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that ruling class is taken care of. Yes. All right, that's the dismal state of local politics in Chicago and Cook County, which hasn't really changed in about a century. So, speaking of law enforcement, the Epstein case, we find now, at least according to a New York Times report, that the two guards assigned to the duty of monitoring prisoners, including Epstein, were asleep for 3 hours, and that's what gave Epstein the opportunity to consummate his motive, which apparently was to off himself. Those two have been relieved, and the warden has been reassigned.
And it was weird because while they were taking their nap, allegedly, their cellmate assigned to Jeffrey Epstein was removed and taken somewhere else so that he was by himself and no one even monitoring. Because a lot of prison guards do rely on inmates to watch out for their cellmates.
I'd like to know a little bit more about those prison guards, too, and so would Jeffrey Epstein's attorney.
Yeah, here's one of the attorneys for the victims who has a conspiracy theory.
Someone failed astronomically when it comes to bringing this man to justice and allowing this to occur. Either he should have been on suicide watch and this would have been prevented, or alternatively, why would they ever make the decision to take him off suicide watch? Or finally, someone was paid intentionally to look the other way.
So you're not sold on the fact that this was indeed a suicide?
Not yet. Not until a full investigation is undertaken. All of those jailers are interviewed. All of their bank accounts are looked at. I would not be surprised if someone within that jail has an offshore bank account somewhere that just got a lot larger.
Again, one of Epstein's victims' attorneys,
Right.
I misspoke,
Yeah,
not Epstein's attorneys. Legitimate questions he raises. There have been incidents that have been reported at MCC where prison guards have been bribed, so it's certainly worth checking out. Who are these guards? One of them was supposedly not a full-fledged corrections officer. Was he some flunky, idiot cousin of some politician in New York? I don't know. But all the questions surrounding those two should be asked and answered. President Trump on the tarmac in Morristown, New Jersey, suggesting he doesn't know either, despite some of the controversy over some of his retweets, but he wants all stones turned over as well.
That's been going on for a long time. The whole Epstein episode. And I know it's under investigation by Attorney General Barr, and I'm sure he's going to be handling it. The retweet, which is what it was as a retweet, was from somebody that's a very respected conservative pundit. So I think that was fun, yeah.
Appropriate for you to be spreading that kind of conspiracy theory? I really don't
No, basically what we're saying is we want an investigation. I want a full investigation. And that's what I absolutely am demanding. That's what our Attorney General, our great Attorney General, is doing. He's doing a full investigation.
So for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by James Fitzgerald, retired FBI special agent, famed criminal profiler from the Unabomber case, among others. And that Unabomber case, of course, inspired the Manhunt series on Netflix, which you can see, and you should see. It's really good. Paul Bettany plays the Unabomber, and Sam Worthington plays James Fitzgerald. He's also the author of a series of books, A Journey to the Center of the Mind. James Fitzgerald, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Top of the morning to you, Dan and Amy, and all your listeners.
So, as you've watched the events unfold since the weekend to present, did you see this as, and the news coming out yesterday about these guards being asleep at the switch, apparently, do you see this as just a prison failure, an MCC failure, or is this a larger systemic failure of law enforcement?
Well, I'm pretty much a firm believer in Occam's razor. That is, all things being equal, the simplest answer may be the correct answer. My career and working different types of cases usually played out that way. But of course, there's always twists and turns, and you bring in this foul-smelling mixing bowl of interest, ideologies, and irrationality, mix in partisan politics, and yes, the media. Who knows what you're going to wind up here in terms of accusations, and where little things are made to look like big things made to look like little things. So I want this fully investigated. This is something I've done dozens of times in my career. It's an equivocal death investigation. That's what we call it in law enforcement circles. You're looking at every aspect of this case, every bit of evidence, every bit of witness information, visitor logs, letters, calls, everything like that. I'm talking in this specific case, and the FBI and anyone else who's part of this mini task force will try to determine exactly the cause of death as well as the manner of death.
But you're not.
Now, again,
you can't rule out that anyone got paid off, can you?
Boy, I'll tell you, it would be very risky to pay off someone in the MCC and not think there'd be some kind of a paper trail or a money trail, the proverbial follow the money, that wouldn't show up pretty quickly somewhere. And so that would surprise me, but of course I can't rule it out. And does it mean that person actually killed Epstein? No. But did they do exactly what we think happened here? And that is spent, 3+ hours away taking a long nap, in which they're not only paid probably overtime rate to do, but also perhaps some sort of a bonus by someone who just wanted them to keep out of the way. But again, I'm not going there quite yet. A lot more has to be learned before that is a scenario that we can lock into.
Do you have a favorite internet meme on the Epstein conspiracy theory front yet? And we were just talking about those earlier. There's many to choose from. With respect to the Department of Justice, there's been some suggestion. Wait a second. Shouldn't there be some redundancy here where you don't just leave this up to the MCC? I mean, I understand the counter. This is a rare occurrence, but you have the most high-profile prisoner in federal custody at present, and you want to take you want to eliminate all risks. So should the Department of Justice have provided additional oversight to make sure that nobody could get to Epstein and that Epstein couldn't get to himself, particularly after what was perceived to be a previous suicide attempt?
Well, let me answer that, Dan, by going way back in my career, and I cover this in my second book, my police officer years in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, a northern suburb of Philly. And the quick version is, along with the U.S. Marshals, we identified an international hitman living in our suburban town. He had killed the chief of police of Palermo, Italy. He was involved in killing people involved in the Vatican bank scandal. He was robbing banks in the U.S., and we found him in our town. We locked him up. He escaped from prison in the past. I'm the detective sergeant involved there, working with the marshals, our chief of police. Long story short, we do get him. No gunshots fired. Plenty of guns in his house. We put him in our little jail cell, and it was my job to assist the watching of this guy. And basically, we set up for overnight purposes. We had someone sit in a chair outside the cell and stare at him for 4-hour shifts at a time.
Yeah.
He eventually went to the MCC the next morning because he's going to be extradited to Italy, but he wound up languishing there. This guy, William Marico is his name, for 1.5 years. Guess what? He's in the MCC. He gets out of his cell. He goes down a window with some other inmate with some sheets. Obviously, these sheets could hold some weight, but the sheets weren't long enough. He fell to his death. Was that a suicide? Was it an escape attempt? Accidental? We don't know. But that was in 1984. This international hitman wound up dying in the MCC, and I played an indirect role in at least putting him there in that facility. Years later, I had to go into the MCC as an FBI agent in New York City and wire up a guy I put in there for bank robbery because he was getting information from another inmate who wanted to kill the son of a federal judge in New York, because that judge convicted his son and gave him a high sentence. And it's very difficult to wire somebody up inside any prison, much less the MCC, because you don't know who exactly. You don't trust the inmates at all, of course, but you sometimes don't even know who you can trust among the workers there. So there's just two quick anecdotes, and I've spent many of the times visits to MCC, getting inmates in and out, and it can be very tricky trying to work within those confines and finding the right people with whom to interact to get your law enforcement or criminal justice job done. So you're going to have a lot of people in this case. A lot of competing elements at work here, and that is some who may know it's a suicide would want it to appear as a homicide, and some who may know it's a homicide would want it to appear as a suicide. And again, I'm not locking into the homicide thing yet. This could have been Epstein doing it to himself, no question, but did someone facilitate that, give him the different set of sheets, again, give him 3 hours to do his thing? These are all issues that have to be answered down the line.
But those anecdotes you shared, don't they speak to, like, if you knew that about the MCC, your experiences, then ostensibly other people in law enforcement, the FBI, Department of Justice, would know the same thing, and they would take the same approach that you took with the hitman when he was in your local prison.
Absolutely, and I certainly realize we have, surveillance cameras and TV sets now. You don't necessarily have to sit right in front of the guy's cell and stare through the bars like I did and my colleagues did back in '82, but you have some kind of a system set up where you could watch them full time and not be sleeping while you're watching this particular TV show. Something went drastically wrong here. This should not have happened, but unfortunately it did. Some heads have rolled, and we'll see down the line where it goes in terms of any more of an expansive head rolling, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the actual investigation, I mean, they're looking at co-conspirators, people who help him get sex slaves, and those who may have used them. Prince Andrew being one of them. There's a picture of him and this alleged sex slave. She was then 17 years old, splashed all over the tabloids in the UK. And the fact that Sarah Ferguson took Epstein's money to clear her debts. So they clearly had a relationship, and there's pictures of Epstein and Prince Andrew together. Do you think he'd be extradited back here to this country and face any charges?
Well, there would be an attempt. I think the royal family already issued some kind of a statement saying they believe him categorically. He had nothing to do with anything illegal involving, this fantasy island scenario here. So there's going to be a lot of issues at play here, a lot of lawyers involved. And let me tell you, as a profiler, I would work some cases with our agents in the field, be it FBI, other agencies. And when they're going to arrest someone of a high-profile background, and it doesn't have to be sex crimes, it could be white-collar crimes, something like that, and they could be big fish in small ponds, someone who wouldn't get national coverage, we would always tell them, put this guy or this woman on suicide watch, because their entire life, their entire career is about to come down before them. Throw in a case like this with Epstein and all kinds of sexual issues and proclivities, illegal ones at that. And I hate to put it this bluntly, but I think the investigators should consider almost everybody on this suspect list as someone that could, if they are arrested, to be put on some kind of a suicide watch, because their whole lives are about to come down in the worst way. Having sex with underage, with children essentially, and Epstein may not be the last one we see that takes this course of action.
Yeah, and as a criminal profiler, if somebody already had the nickname Randy Andy, as Prince Andrew does, that seems to be maybe a target. No, I mean, it's a good point. It also speaks to the need to have a sense of urgency about bringing ringleaders like perhaps this associate, madam, whatever she was, Ghislaine Maxwell, into custody sooner rather than later if you don't want the case to fall apart with respect to potentially other targets.
Yeah, she's, if Epstein is Dr. Evil, she's Frau Farbissina in their little island there, getaway. And she should be put into custody somewhere, also on any kind of a protective custody suicide watch. But she holds the keys to the kingdom. And, of course, one of these people is going to come forward, or maybe a few of them, and they'll say, hey, I'll tell you everything, but you got to give me a break. Of course, they'll do this through their high-priced attorneys. Who knows who's paying for those high-priced attorneys, as long as certain other people can be kept out of the mix. So there's going to be a lot of legal juggling and interplay going on here. This is going to get uglier before it gets prettier. Actually, it'll never get pretty, but there's going to be a lot of things that happen that may shock the sensibilities. We're going to find out things that, again, many of us wouldn't even imagine in the worst sort of, X-rated movie, because it involves young kids, human trafficking, and this should just never happen. And I can't believe that the ringleader of it all is now dead of his own hands, whether helped by someone, whether undertaken by someone else, we don't know yet, but this should never have happened. But the case will go on. I am confident in the rank and file of the FBI and certainly the present administration. They will get to the bottom of this and figure out just what happened and who else was involved.
I want to get your opinion on another topic. I don't know if you were involved in any public corruption cases, politicians during your time, but of course the news this week again that Rod Blagojevich, the disgraced governor, which actually that's the name of our office here, disgraced governor. Every governor gets that title.
They walk across Illinois.
Rod Blagojevich may get a commutation from President Trump. And I wonder when you as an FBI guy, as a G-man, see something like that, see a commutation by a president for somebody who you were involved in getting a conviction on and getting a sentence on, if you take that sort of stuff personally.
Yeah, good question, Dan. I have worked as a profile, assisting on public corruption cases. I don't think there's any one person, how you're describing it. I remember locking up also in 1982 a Roman Catholic priest. I caught him in the act of abusing several young boys in a parking lot.
Yes.
Details aren't important here, but that's also in my book. And he was let go, basically. It wasn't a pardon or a commutation, but basically got a slap on the wrist and let go. And I said, what's going on here? The Catholic Church doesn't want to handle this. Little did I know this was the tip of the iceberg, what was happening back in those days. So I took that personally, that he got off with such a slap, with barely a slap on the wrist, no jail time, and, probation, that he was reoffending, years later and working around kids. But I certainly know other agents involved in cases that would there be some kind of a pardon or commutation. I think you just decide to move on to the next case. You can't take it too personal. Sometimes politics are involved at a very high level. I think as long as the defendant, the convicted person, served some jail time and they're basically ruined for life, not that that's the goal of your investigation, but in terms of balancing that with a commutation or pardon, you just move on to the next case and do your best to make a prosecution stick.
He is retired FBI special agent and renowned criminal profiler from the Unabomber case. James Fitzgerald, also the author of a series of books.